Right, so Keir Starmer is well and truly on the ceasefire in Gaza bandwagon now that Rishi Sunak has jumped first. The Labour leader ready, willing and able to match the Tories policy on policy, because that's the kind of leader he is, the sort that follows. Though whether he means any of it, given that he's bought and paid for by the Israel lobby, remains to be seen. I certainly won't be taking his word for it. The man lies like Boris Johnson on an off day. Starmer is currently in Estonia, posing in camouflage gear and fatigues, despite Estonia being a perfectly safe country to travel to right now, not engaged in warfare itself, but does share a border with Russia, and goodness knows the guy loves to look tough, so cue lots of upshots from cameramen to detract from Starmer's now obvious Napoleon Complex. Fancies himself as playing a part in global warfare, but just don't draw attention to his height. Speaking of which, you've seen his Christmas card? I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Starmer, though, chose to talk ceasefire in Gaza to camera whilst dressed in combat gear and stood in front of a tank while doing it. The optics tell you more about him than words ever could, and the camera doesn't lie like a rug like he does. Right, so this is a video of two halves, really. The Napoleon Complex of Keir Starmer, also called small man syndrome, where those of a more diminutive stature, shall we put it. Nothing wrong with that in and of itself, of course, except in those individuals who make up for their lack of height and aggressiveness and attitude, and in Starmer's case, certainly a hell of a lot of ego. But let's start with his little hard man trip to Estonia, where he spoke to Sky News about his desire to see a ceasefire in Gaza, all mere weeks after losing 10 members of his front bench because he was completely opposed to one, of course. But now that the even smaller Rishi Sunak has come out in favour of a sort of ceasefire, a sustainable ceasefire as the Tories are calling it, rather than an immediate ceasefire or a permanent ceasefire, a David Cameron PR exercise as it is, basically, Starmer is right there on his coattails, but he's gone one better because he's raided Mr. Ben's dressing up shop and played soldier whilst he did it in a warehouse in not at all war-torn Estonia, talking ceasefire in front of the biggest gun he could find stuck on the front of a tank. Whose genius idea was that? Is John McTernan advising Labour again? So what did Starmer have to say for himself then? Well, he said, I do support a sustainable ceasefire, and what we're arguing for is a return to the position we were in just a few weeks ago, when the hostilities did cease and provided the opportunity for hostages to be released, provided the opportunity for very much needed humanitarian aid to get into Gaza, but most importantly provided a foothold for a political process to actually resolve this in favour of a two-state solution. We are strongly in favour of a two-state solution, and that has to be something which international partners are very, very clear about and is not in the gift of Israel. Not in the gift of Israel? If it was what Israel wanted, it would be in their gift to do. It would happen. But it isn't, so it won't. And you've been told this now. You know this now. How can you not know this? Even if you missed Benjamin Netanyahu's shock confession where he boasted of being a decades-long block to the two-state solution. The Labour Muslim Network, literally your Labour Muslim affiliate body, to your party, Labour Party, have written to you in the last few days specifically about the UK ambassador for Israel's comments dismissing the two-state solution as some kind of an obsession. They asked you to disown the ambassador. Have you done it? Or have you just ignored the Muslim members of your party yet again? Dressed in those fatigues and with his customary ignorance of people or organisations he doesn't wish to listen to, dressed in his combats for that interview. Why? Not in any danger. He looked the very epitome of inaction man. Not action man, he's inaction man, or GI genocide maybe. You aren't dressed to talk about peace when you're in camouflage gear, are you? The Foreign Office deems Estonia a safe country to visit, so who are you camouflaging yourself from? But this was just one example of hilarity, of Starmer's ego coming into play, coming out of this trip that he took with his Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey, because some of the photographs they've clearly posed for are comedy gold. Here they are together, an upshot. Now these have become customary for Starmer. These have become a bit of a theme for him, because of course it makes him look taller. That Napoleon Complex coming out, looking like a couple of doormen here for a church. Here's another of the two of them together, Starmer, far away staring. At least he isn't doing his pointing thing for a change. The pair of them looking like they're auditioning, but strictly here, quite honestly. Here's another Starmer and Healey hard man gem coming down some stairs, looking like some pale Mitchell brother knockoffs. Another upshot, incidentally, you will note, to mask that diminutive stature. Here's another. The soldiers are onto who the weakest link is in this little gang here. Who the sacrificial lamb is. Starmer whiter than white, whilst everyone else has slapped mud on their faces. And here's another, where they managed to find a soldier shorter than he is, just to make him feel better, which wasn't at all done on purpose at all, was it? And here's one last one, where he's looking like he's scrutinising a restaurant menu rather than looking at a map. He's looking mightily puzzled by it, quite honestly. Perhaps Palestine is marked on that one, and it's thrown him a bit. And this poor woman looks like she's about to die of boredom straight into her dinner. The photos are a big thing for Starmer, and his height is clearly a hang-up. You might up until this point think I've been, well, I don't know, a bit unfair, being nasty, mocking him, or being a bit heightist. Surely an accusation I'm consciously wary of, because I'm a 6-footer myself. My parents, for the record, were both shorter than Starmer, though. But if that is your thinking, I'd just like to draw your attention to the Starmer's Christmas card this year. The Starmers, yes, because husband and wife, they're both on it. And if you haven't seen it, here it is. It's lovely, lovely, fabulous glittery card. I'm sure he had plenty of glitter left over after he had a load dumped on his head earlier this year. Glitter everywhere. Also suspected to have been a bit of a setup by some, so he could just brush off a stage invasion and act all tough again. That's a lovely photo, isn't it, of Starmer, anyway? All bright and light, and his dimly lit wife seemingly walking a step or two behind him, like she's been accidentally caught by camera, and it should all be about him, hence the lighting. His slightly shorter wife, you'll note, at that. Here's the thing, though. It's completely photoshopped. This is the original picture here. And not only is Starmer clearly shorter than his wife, she might be wearing heels, who knows, but it was enough that it had to be altered to make him look taller. But not only that, he got lit up more to cover up the wrinkles, and she was put in the dark. It was another low shot, too, taken from ground level. If I was his wife, I know where I'd be sticking this card, having seen what he'd done. For some reason, they've made his left arm massive as well, presumably to cover up the shortening of the image of his wife. Poor editing, a hang-up about his height to the point he had photos taken from the floor and photoshopped others posing in military gear, not at all in an effort to look tough, when he's about as intimidating as a wet sock, and is evidently intimidated himself by the height of his own wife. When you go to this much effort to tell people you're not short, or are desperate to get people thinking that you're not short, and that you're acting all tough because you wear camouflage gear and you dress up like a soldier, it just tells people that you are compensating for something, and you don't mean a word of it. And it's also that you don't mean a word of what you say. With a litany of lies to his name longer than Mr. Tickle's arms, it's just one more show of dishonesty from a man who was also clearly a narcissist, making him even more like Boris Johnson than I previously thought. And just like Johnson, he ignores what is actually important too, like following up your words with actions, disowning that UK ambassador for what she said about a two-state solution, for one, and as this video explains. And if you want to know more about that, then you should absolutely watch it next. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.